Welcome everyone and everybody. I am Luxeley, the man behind a microphone, keyboard, and mouse, and this is the long-awaited, highly requested Shadow Priest guide. If you're a Shadow Priest, you're going to learn how to drive one and make it purr like a Ferrari. If you're not a Shadow Priest, you'll learn how to crash and burn one, aka send it to the graveyard. Now, I've broken this down into different categories, so you could click the links in the description to get to whatever you want to see at any given point. The first category, we're going to talk about mastery, Draenor perks, and stats, and how it affects you. The second section is all about talents. What to choose, what not to choose. I'm not necessarily going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to give you the pros and cons and let you decide for yourself and explain how it fits into my playstyle, which has proven to be very successful. Third section is glyphs. Once again, much like the talents, not going to tell you what to choose, what not to choose, just some pros and cons of a few particular glyphs that you could swap in and out. And the fourth section, I'm going to talk about rotation, and I'm also going to give you a few burst tips and Shadow Priest tips and tricks. Now, there is more than one way to play a Shadow Priest, and I'm going to go over the style that works for me. And it works because I'm comfortable with it, because it flows very smoothly, and it's a lot of fun. So sit back, and I'll let you decide and just go over the pros and cons. Shadow's mastery is mental anguish. Very simply, increases the damage of Mind Blast, Mind Spike, and Mind Flay by 20%. This will scale upwards as you increase your mastery. This new mastery in Warlords of Draenor suggests a certain playstyle, which I'm going to go over later on in the video when we discuss the talents. Now, you get 4 Draenor perks, and 3 of those 4 perks further will suggest a certain kind of playstyle to optimize and maximize the Shadow Priest. The Draenor perk that doesn't suggest a certain playstyle is Power Word Shield. It basically reduces Weakened Soul by 3 seconds. It's free, we'll take it. It's not great, it's not bad, it's average, but more shields, hey, who's gonna argue? The next 3 Draenor perks really starts to bring into focus a certain playstyle. Enhanced Shadow Orbs. 5 orbs, not 3 orbs, 5 orbs. 5 is better than 3. You could ask any 5-year-old, is 5 better than 3? They will say yes. This is absolutely huge because it means more Devouring Plague, which incidentally can be used on more than one target now, and is now your main heal, and also can be used for Psychic Horror. More Psychic Horrors. Enhanced Shadow Word Death. More death. Awesome stuff. In the past, you hit Shadow Word Death. If you didn't kill the target, it reset, but it only generated 1 orb. Now, it generates 2 orbs. So it's to your benefit not to kill the target because you'd rather get that second orb. So you'd rather use 2 Shadow Word Deaths when the opportunity presents itself. More Shadow Orbs equals more damage, more CC, better for you, and more heals. Enhanced Mind Flay basically expedites your Mind Flay damage by 33%, so 33% faster on your Mind Flay damage. Add more haste to the mix, and you have a pretty significant perk here. I'm going to talk about how this perk and the other 2 perks really fit into a how to burst scenario for Shadow Priest, and you'll see how this takes focus later on in the video when I discuss burst. It really is a necessity to talk about the set bonuses for both PvP and PvE, because I do know a few people, they kind of like to use PvE gear in PvP, and with Shadow Priest, it really might be worth it. First, the PvP gear and the bonuses. The 2-set bonus. Basically, when Dispersion ends, you're going to gain 1950 versatility for 10 seconds. More damage, more heals for 10 seconds. This is a really good perk, because a lot of times when you disperse, people's like, oh, 90% damage reduction, run away, focus another target. Now you can quickly get out of dispersion and either heal yourself or start DPSing again. So it really does work very well with that nice little buff for 10 seconds, which is really, really cool. Now, the 4-set bonus is even better, as it usually is. Shadow Orbs spent on Psychic Horror are refunded at a rate of 1 orb per 3 seconds. So you're generating Shadow Orbs with Mind Blast, you're generating Shadow Orbs with Shadow Word Death, and you're getting them back when you use them on Psychic Horror. This is an excellent, excellent 4-piece perk. Like I said before, some people, they like to PvP in PvE gear, and that's fine. And this particular situation with a Shadow Priest, it really might be worth it. I just can't be bothered grinding it out to get this gear and rage, doing something I absolutely despise in-game. I hate raiding. I hate PvE with a passion. I've tried it in Kata. It's not for me. I respect people who do it. I know it requires a certain amount of dedication and skill, and I respect that, but it's just not for me. The extent of my PvE is killing Drek in Alterac Valley, and that's even too much. But these set bonuses need to be mentioned because they're pretty darn good, and kind of makes me a little conflicted. The 2-piece bonus is consuming shadow orbs reduces the cooldown on Mind Blast by half a second per orb consumed. More Mind Blasts, pretty darn good. Something to look into. The 4-piece bonus, each time Devouring Plague deals damage. Now, mind you, you are going to be putting Devouring Plague on multiple targets. So this is pretty huge. And each time it deals damage, it's going to increase your haste by 1% for 4 seconds, stacking up to 12 times. So a 12% increase into haste is pretty good. I took a quick peek at some of the major WoW websites to see what they were trumpeting with regard to stat priority for Shadow Priest. I agree with 90% of what they say. I'm going to go over that one point I disagree on in a few moments. First, Intellect Multi-Strike. Grab as much of it as you most possibly can. It's like gasoline on fire in a good way. It's your 2 most preferred stats. Now, secondary stats. The priorities that I see in the general consensus of the websites out there, it's versatility, crit, mastery, haste. I'm saying versatility, mastery, crit, haste. Here's my reasoning. Versatility, increased heals, increased damage, greater absorbs. It's the trifecta. It's the holy trinity for Shadow Priest. It's great. Grab as much of it as you most possibly can. Mastery. I choose mastery over crit for 2 reasons. One, my playstyle is basically using and abusing mastery to its greatest capacity. And 2, in the beginning of an X-Pack, crit is not as saturated, not as prevalent as it is later on in the X-Pack. Everybody's crit is low. Historically, this has been the case with WoW. So patch 0.4, 0.5, 6.3, 6.4, 6, whatever patch later on, I might revisit it. But for now, mastery over crit. And last, coming in last, is haste. Why? We're no longer playing a dot spec. We're playing a run and gun spec with tremendous burst. And that's coming in the talents next. I'm going to be a little bit dyslexic, start with the level 100 talents, because this is the part of the talent tree where you choose what style you want to play. Do you want to play a dot and watch them rot style, or do you want to play the run and gun style? Even though the dot style does more damage, I strongly prefer the run and gun style, just simply because by being mobile, you're creating opportunities. Opportunities to maximize your DPS, your opportunities to DPS, and your opportunities to CC a target or evade damage. Mobile is the way to go, especially at the beginning of this X-Pack, which is very, very heavily melee favored. Auspicious Spirits. Your Shadow Apparitions grant you 1 Shadow Orb instead of dealing damage. Wonderful. They didn't do a lot of damage anyway, but this is more of a PvE type of talent, and I'll explain why. In a raid, the boss is usually 30 or 40 yards away from you, and he's pretty much just standing there trash-talking you. He's not moving around, he's not being very mobile in most cases, and even if he is, he's still within that 30-40 yard range. In PvP, completely different story. People are running out of the range of your cast, they're running behind pylons, you have maps like AV and Isle Conquest, which are huge, so it takes a long time for these turtle apparitions to get where they're going, and that means that your Shadow Orbs that are going to be refunded aren't exactly FedEx back to you. It's not happening as fast as you'd like it to happen. Also, at the beginning of an X-Pack, crit is scarce across the board for everyone. This has been historical with WoW. So, I want to point out that these Shadow Apparitions are contingent on crits by Shadow Word Pain, and my run and gun style of play doesn't use Shadow Word Pain as much as it's really been used in the past. Void Entropy is your choice if you want to play the dot and watch them rot style. consumes 3 shadow orbs to deal massive shadow damage over 1 minute. Think Warlock Doom, but a better version of it. And Devouring Plague will refresh this effect to its full 1 minute duration. Think about it. Having 4 dots on a target and this big dot on a target is huge. Void Entropy, Devouring Plague, Shadow Word Pain, and Vampiric's Touch. Huge. Huge. You're not going to kill people quickly, but you are going to kill them inevitably. Dot and watch them rot. Void Entropy actually does the most damage by about 8 to 12%. That's significant. However, because you're not mobile, because you have 3 hard casts, you're not going to create a lot of opportunities for you to get these spells off. And you're going to be a sitting duck most of the time. You are going to attract a melee train. And a melee train for a Shadow Priest is a freight train going downhill with no brakes. Clarity of Power is my run and gun style. And I choose this not because you get an additional 40% damage from Mind Spike, Mind Shear, and Shadow Word Death on targets that aren't affected by Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch. I choose it because it reduces the cooldown of Mind Blast by 3 seconds and makes it instant. Basically, you're not going to be using Vampiric Touch as much as you've done in the past, and your Mind Blast is going to be instant. 2 less hard casts. This gives you the opportunity to be mobile. Use your feathers to be crafty, and use your spectral guys to be slick and evade, and constantly be moving at a 60% extra speed, because it makes it a little bit harder for a rogue to shadow step you, a little bit harder for a DK to death grip you, for a warrior to charge you, etc, etc, etc. A mobile target is a lot more difficult to hit. Think of a dartboard and think of darts. Now, how hard is it to hit the center? Kinda hard. How hard is it to hit the center if the dartboard is moving? I think you guys get the point. Run and gun in this heavily melee favored X-Pack thus far, it might change, is the way to go. The level 90 talents, how can I put this nicely? Well, they pretty much suck. Back in MOP, they did above average damage and healed you quite a bit. Now, they deal terrible damage and they don't heal you. There isn't a good choice here. It's either death by lethal injection, death by hanging, or death by firing squad. Hey, but it's a freebie, so we'll have to choose something. The worst one is Divine Star. I totally would avoid it. It's got the shortest cooldown, which is great, and it's something that you can use if there is melee around you. The problem with it is it doesn't do that much damage compared to the other 2, and it's very linear dependent, meaning whatever is directly in front of you is where the damage is gonna go. Halo is your second worst choice. I don't like the talent. It's not as good as it sounds. It does do a significant amount of damage to the targets further away, but as a Shadow Priest, you kind of would want something that you could do some damage to someone who's close to you. You have enough stuff that can already do damage to targets far away. It seems like it's a good talent to get rogues, druids, hunters out of stealth, but the fact is, it probably only works 50% of the time. It's definitely your preferable choice for 2s or 3s in Arena, but I kind of like Cascade a bit better. It's kind of middle of the road when it comes to cooldowns and damage, but I like the fact that I get to have that instant damage when there's a target in front of me, and it will do more damage than Divine Star and Halo to targets that are close to me. The downside of it is, after it hits its initial target, the rest of the damage is random. Who knows where it's going? It's like a drunk child with a loaded gun. I don't know where the bullets are going. They could go anywhere. But the point is, for targets that are close to you, particularly melee, when you do that initial damage, it does more damage than the other 2 to targets that are close to you. And that's what I like about it. And the cooldown, 25 seconds, is pretty good. So Cascade is my choice for BGs and RBGs. For Arena, I would most certainly go with Halo. The level 75 talent's going to start with Twist of Fate. Sounds a lot better than it actually is. When you deal damage to a target below 35% health, you deal 15% increased damage and healing for 10 seconds. Pretty cool. Let's face it, it does sound good, but here's the problem with this. That extra 15% damage in most cases is going to stop you from using 2 Shadow Word Deaths as opposed to 1. And because Shadow Word Death is instant cast and because you're getting refunded 2 Shadow Orbs on a reset, you want to be able to use it twice. It's to your advantage. So Twist of Fate is going to cut into that. Less Shadow Orbs, not particularly a good idea for a run and gun style of play. Shadowy Insight. Your Shadow Word Pain damage over time and Mind Spike damage give you a 5% chance to reset the cooldown on Mind Blast and make your next Mind Blast instant. Great if you're using the dot and watch them rot style. If you're using a run and gun style, you already have an instant Mind Blast and your cooldown is already reduced, so your cooldown is 6 seconds at most. This makes no sense to me at all. And the majority of Shadow Priests use this talent. I'm talking like 80% of them. Why? Because the big websites that cover WoW say Shadowy Insight is the way to go. They're right about a lot of things. I don't want to blast them, no pun intended, but they're wrong about this. I almost feel like they said, hey Skeeter, go play a Shadow Priest and tell us what we gotta use at level 75. And Skeeter never played a Shadow Priest before. That leads me to the clear-cut choice for many reasons, which is Power Infusion. Increases your haste by 25%, reduces the mana cost of all spells by 20%, 2-minute cooldown, a little bit high, but this is highly important for the run and gun style because it's a key ability that you're going to clump together with other abilities to use your burst, which we're going to talk about later after I go over some of those other abilities that you're going to clump together and use. Power Infusion is also great in Arena. If your healer is in a position where he has to hardcast a lot of heals to heal people, which is going to be the case with Dampening, this is perfect for it. Give him Power Infusion, increase his haste by 25%, reduce his mana cost. Perfect for Arena, 2s, 3s, 5s, whatever. This is the way to go. This is why it makes sense. Let me know if you guys agree, because I just don't see the point of resetting a cooldown that's 6 seconds, okay? Power Infusion, increasing that haste is going to give you tremendous burst, and you're going to hear more about that when I talk about rotation and burst. The level 60 talents conflict me. Not because they're bad, but because they're all pretty good, and they all fill a particular niche. It's not a bad talent on this part of the tree. This is where all the fruit is. Void Tendrils. The good things first. Roots up to 5 enemies within 8 yards for 20 seconds. Great against melee. If you find yourself being trained quite a bit by melee, this, in conjunction with Spectral Guise and your Angelic Feathers, is a great way to peel yourself. Also, Void Tendrils is perfect for rooting healers LOS of their DPS and rooting DPS LOS of their healers, either or in BGs, RBGs, or particularly Arena. So if you're facing a heavy melee type of comp in RBGs or Arena, probably Void Tendrils is your best bet. But here's the problem with it. The damage it takes to break it is significantly less than it was in MoP. And every single melee class has something to counter this. They all do. Put a melee class in the comments and I'll tell you what they can counter it with, and more importantly, how many counters they have, because some classes have more than one. Dominate Mind. Anybody that's been walked off the cliff in AB or walked off the face of the earth in Eye of the Storm knows a little bit about Dominate Mind. First, the good stuff. It's a range CC. One of the few range CCs that you have, because silence doesn't necessarily work on melee targets that aren't DKs and that aren't paladins. So this works against melee to dominate them from range. Also, for Psychic Scream and Void Tendrils, if you want to CC someone, you want to CC melee, you got to run up to them. And when you run up to melee, you're putting yourself in harm's way. So Dominate Mind is great for that. And it's also a lot of fun. Here's the downside. Anytime you use Dominate Mind, to give you a chess analogy, it's like sacrificing a pawn for a pawn. Yes, you're taking someone out of the mix, but you're also taking yourself out of the mix. and that can tend to be a problem in certain situations. I'd recommend this in BGs where you have to capture the flag. It's a great way of walking healers out of range of their DPS or flag carrier, and the same thing with Arena. But my best choice that I feel is Psychic Scream. Warlocks, Priests, they have fear, and Psychic Scream, people hate it, but the fact is, it creates all kinds of havoc. It throws people off their game. Yes, a lot of melee can counter it. Probably more melee can counter this than they can counter Void Tendrils. But my point is, if you use it judiciously, it can still work. And it's great against casters. If Silence is on cooldown, you could run up to a healer and Psychic Scream and completely disorient him. It interrupts him, and he has to wait or trinket it and kind of realign himself with his target and what he's doing. Psychic Scream just creates all kinds of havoc, and that's why it's probably your best choice. The other two are not bad. Matter of fact, they're very good. There isn't a bad choice in this section. It's just a question of what it is you feel you need to fill a gap with. For me, it's Psychic Scream. For others, it could very well be Dominate Mine or Void Tendrils. The level 45 talent's going to start off with Mindbender. The Mindbender attacks a target, and basically it's an improved Shadow Fiend. It generates more mana, does more damage, and reduces the cooldown by 2 minutes. Back in MoP, this was the talent that I chose. Not because it was the best, because it was a necessity. My mana was always at like 8%. I desperately needed mana regen and needed it often, so I had to choose the Mindbender. The reason this is a good talent is not because of the mana regen or even the extra damage, it's just damage from another source. Because if you use Insanity, you're using it in sync. It's basically a better Mind Flay. If you're using Surge of Darkness, it's basically a Mind Spike. This is sustained damage by another source, which is the Mindbender, and it's on a shorter cooldown, so you can use it more often. That would be the reason I'd choose it. Surge of Darkness, or Absence of Light, your choice. Vampiric Touch, Devouring Plague damage has a 10% chance to cause Mind Spike to be instant, deal 50% additional damage, and accumulate up to 3 charges. How's this different than MoP? I think it does more damage. It's very, very much in sync with your mastery, and it's triggered by Devouring Plague, has 3 charges as opposed to 2. Very good talent. You know how I feel about instant casts, but you're not going to be casting Vampiric Touch as much as you used to, so only Devouring Plague is really going to be what triggers this, so that's why I shy away from it, although I do use it quite a bit. Heavily melee favorite comp in an RBG or even an arena, you might want to get that extra instant cast through Surge of Darkness, but I still think Insanity is a little bit better. Shadow Word Insanity. Some people think I'm insane for using this, and that's perfectly fine. I think that this is the best way to go. This is where your burst comes into focus. And I'll get into that later on in the video when I talk about rotation and burst. But if you couple this with Power Word Infusion on a target, if that target doesn't have any defenses up or any hots on them, it's going to go down extremely fast. And I mean fast. And that means you're going to get to Shadow Word Death, dead target. Just take a look at my BG videos. You'll see this happening 24/7. Also, why this is a little bit different than it was in MoP. In MoP, you only would trigger this with Devouring Plague. Now you can trigger this with Psychic Horror. And if you recall your PvP set bonus, your Psychic Horrors are the orbs that it takes to use them are being refunded back to you. So now you have 2 abilities that can trigger this. The bottom line is, if you click Power Infusion and you're a race that can use an on-use PvP trinket, and if you pop up Shadow Word Pain and have the time to pop up Vampiric Touch, if you use this when a target has Devouring Plague on them also, dead target, and very, very quick because of that haste. Shadow Word Insanity is where your burst comes into focus. The level 30 part of this tree is a source of conflict. Here's the deal. The greatest challenge a Shadow Priest is gonna face is peeling himself. He doesn't have a blink, he doesn't have a portal. It's really hard to do. That's where the challenge lies. And you need 3 things to do this. You need some kind of CC, preferably a root. You also need to have something that removes movement impairments and something that gives you a speed boost. This tree says either you could remove your impairments or you could have the speed boost, but you can't have both. Back in MOP, there was a macro I did that macroed Fade with Spectral Guise, and it was a 1-button, 1-press macro because Fade was off the global cooldown. Throw in the Glyph of Fade, and you get a 10% damage reduction. So with the press of 1 button and throwing out a Psychic Scream or throwing out a Void Tendrils, you were basically able to peel yourself most of the time. Here's the deal now. You don't have both Psychic Scream and Void Tendrils. You've got to choose one of the two. One is always on cooldown, so Phantasm isn't as good as it used to be. It's not the preferred choice. Body and Soul. Power Word Shield and Leap of Faith also increases your target's movement speed by 60% for 4 seconds. Pretty good. You get, in the past it was just Power Word Shield, now they're throwing in Leap of Faith, which you don't use much as a Shadow Priest really. But here is some of the good before I get to the bad. It's on demand. You can use it anytime you want, provided you're not subject to the Weakened Soul effect. And it's 100% effective. One of the problems with the feathers is if you place them down, other players accidentally run over them and you don't get to use them. Another problem with the feathers is their high maintenance, and they require a certain amount of skill to use effectively. Power Word Shield is low maintenance and very easy to use. Here's the problem with it, and the problems outweigh the benefits. I said it before, Weakened Soul. You're subject to the Weakened Soul effect, so you don't always have this ability up when you need it. Also, there are going to be times when you need a shield but not a speed boost, and there are going to be times you're going to need a speed boost and not a shield, and that Weakened Soul thing comes into effect. Angelic Feathers are a gift from the heavens. Yes, they are high maintenance to use. Yes, they are not 100% effective because sometimes other players accidentally or on purpose run over them when you need them. But I'd say that that doesn't happen as much as you think it does because you have 3 charges. Here's the deal. This is an ability that requires some skill, and anyone can develop that skill with simple repetition. Practice, 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 and you will be very fluid with it. It's something I had to do at the beginning of Warlords of Draenor to adjust, and I think I'm very fluid with it, and it's a very, very important component to the run and gun style of play. And your uptime is significantly better with the Angelic Feathers than it is with Body and Soul. For example, you can pop down 3 feathers, and it's always good to put 1 to your left, 1 to your right, and 1 in front of you. Now, as the cooldown resets, you can pop a 4th feather and just run with it. That's why Angelic Feathers is huge. There's a linked video in the description that demonstrates Angelic Feathers, and if you guys want me to make a more in-depth guide of how to practice it and how to become efficient at it, I will gladly do it. Leave it in the comments. Level 15 talents. These are the talents you get before you can even ride a mount. Angelic Bulwark. When an attack brings you below 30% health, you gain an absorption shield equal to 15% of your maximum health for 20 seconds. Can't occur more than once every 90 seconds. First, the good. It's huge. It works very well in Arena because when your healer sees this, he knows he's got to heal you and heal you very soon. But it also gives him a little bit of leeway in case he's CC'd or he's LOS of you to heal you. Excellent, excellent ability for that in 2s and 3s and 5s, obviously. If your trinket of choice, your PvP trinket of choice is the trinket that on use boosts your health, Angelic Bulwark will scale with it. If you're doing 2s or 3s or 5s with Resto Shaman or a Warrior, now you have something else that may purposely or accidentally boost your health. That is where Angelic Bulwark shines. Now for the downside of things. And there's really only one, and that's in BGs and RBGs, because when you're being trained, that is when this is more likely to activate. And it's not going to buy you much time. There's not going to be much more that you could do with that extra 2, 3, or 4, or 5 seconds that you get with Angelic Bulwark. I believe you get a lot more out of the next 2 talents to prevent yourself from getting in that below 30% health situation. Desperate Prayer. If you think about it, is there really any other kind of prayer? Heals the caster for 22% of maximum health. Once again, that trinket, the PvP trinket that boosts your health, will scale with this. Pretty darn cool. Plus, one of the downsides of Shadow Priest is if you're going to use Prayer of Mending or Flash Heal, you're going to have to leave Shadow form, and that's going to immediately reduce your armor in half. So you got to be very careful when you do that, because that's going to make you even more vulnerable when you're already vulnerable to melee. You will be more vulnerable to melee. The good thing about Desperate Prayer is you can use it and not move out of Shadow form. And 22% is a nice pop of a heal. It really is. The one and only downside to this is that 2-minute cooldown. I wish that the cooldown was more like a minute, but I understand why it's 2 minutes. Shadow does have a lot of source of healing, but compared to some other classes, that cooldown isn't really in sync. That is why I am gaga over Spectral Guise. This is an amazing ability. Your shadow blurs into the darkness, leaving your true form behind. Can't tell you how many times I've seen Warriors of Rogues hack at my true form. As a shadow, you are stealth, but remain in combat. Last 6 seconds or until that true form is hit by 3 direct attacks. I honestly do not see a downside with Spectral Guise. All I see is upside. So many good things. First and foremost, you can still peel away from melee if you have a bleed, a dot, or a disease on you. It'll pop you out of it, but it gives you enough time to still have a fighting chance to get away. That's the first good thing. The next good thing, if a mage or an elemental shaman or a warlock is ramping up to cast Spectral Guise, it's almost as good as an interrupt. It's as good as a shadow meld. Another thing, warlock pets, hunter pets, Spectral Guise, they run away. They're gone. It just creates all kinds of havoc. Another unique trick that you could use with Spectral Guise is if you're trying to kind of do some melee, you don't want to run away from them. You want to run through them. You want to run towards them, because the first place they're going to look 90% of the time is they're thinking you want to get away. You're going to run away from them. Run towards them. This is so confusing. It buys you a few precious seconds to be able to cast something very key, whether it's CC or damage. Spectral Guise is your choice. And other 2 talents are pretty darn good. This is that much better. Trust me, Spectral Guise. No Shadow Priest guide is complete without going over the glyphs. 2 of these glyphs are mainstays. You never want to change them. One of them you never want to change unless you're not facing one of 2 different classes. First, Glyph of Mind Blast. Your primary cast is Mind Blast. It's got less than a 6-second cooldown. It's instant. You're running around using it more often than any other spell. Therefore, even though the crits are kind of low in the beginning of an X-Pack, across the board for everyone, you're still going to get enough of them because you're using Mind Blast that much. That's why I strongly urge people to take it. It's creating havoc. Stunning people just creates havoc. It basically disrupts their plan, their agenda, their strategy. You want to get as much stuns out there as possible. Glyph of Mind Blast is one way to do it. Another way is Psychic Horror. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend this, but the reason I do is because the current 2-set PvP bonus is refunding Shadow Orbs when you use Psychic Horror. So it's encouraging you to use it more often, therefore why not lower the cooldown by 10 seconds. Also, Psychic Horror procs Insanity now, so you want to be able to use Psychic Horror as much as possible. The third one is a must against paladins and mages. It will dispel the bubble. That is the Glyph of Mass Dispel. Paladins are like baby kittens without their bubble, because they bubble when they're low on health and they think they're invulnerable, and then boom, Mass Dispel, Shadow Word Death, bye-bye Paladin. Same thing with mages, and it's more imperative to use against mages when they ice block, because now they have a glyph called, I think it's called Icy Regeneration or something to that effect. When they're ice blocked, they regenerate health. So, against mages, against paladins, Glyph of Mass Dispel is a must. When you're not facing those 2 classes, you can choose one of these following glyphs. Another way to go if you need some additional healing, some additional survivability, which isn't a word, but it sounds like one. The Glyph of Power Word Shield. 20% of the absorb from your Power Word Shield is converted into healing. Considering you're using Power Word Shield pretty often, this is pretty darn cool. And if you need survivability, this is one way to go as well. If you find yourself on the other end of the spectrum and you feel you need to do a little bit more damage, Glyph of Reflective Shield causes 70% of the damage you absorb with Power Word Shield to reflect back at the attacker. Causes no threat. That's a PvE thing. It's not a huge damage boost by any stretch of the imagination, but it is noticeable. So you could always go with Reflective Shield if you feel that you need more damage. Only you know the answer to that. Do you need more healing and survivability? Do you need more damage and DPS? Another good boost to your survivability is Glyph of Vampiric Embrace. Vampiric Embrace basically converts an additional 10% of the damage you deal into healing, but the duration is reduced by 5 seconds, not that big of a deal. Here's the problem with this: even though Vampiric Embrace is a lifesaver, Vampiric Embrace is on a 3-minute cooldown, and it's been nerfed a little bit since MOP. So yes, this will help with your survivability if you feel you need that. It's still a good ability, but that 3-minute cooldown on Vampiric Embrace, doesn't make this the #1 choice. The Glyph of Fade. If you find yourself in need of survivability, this is probably your #1 choice. Fade ability now also reduces all damage taken by 10%. Keep in mind that Fade is a very low cooldown. Also, if you choose Spectral Guise and Phantasm, you can macro Fade into that to constantly give yourself that 10% damage reduction, because when you use those abilities, you might need it. It's pretty good if you need survivability. Next up, I'm going to talk about rotation, and it's not your traditional rotation like PvE, because in PvP things happen all the time. People run away from you, they run LOS of you, they CC you, you have a sudden need to CC somebody else, they pop their defenses, which is going to completely mitigate your burst, or you're suddenly forced to pop your defenses or peel yourself. So there's so many things that's going to interrupt your general rotation that there really isn't a rotation. There's a priority system, and that priority system is Shadow Word Death when it procs. That is always your priority, because there's a good chance it's going to reset and it's going to instantly generate 2 Shadow Orbs for you. #2, Mind Blast. Less than a 6-second cooldown, instant cast, constantly on the move, popping Mind Blast, generating Shadow Orbs. That is #2 on the list. #3 is Devouring Plague. Your biggest dot, your biggest heal. Devouring Source is your greatest source of heals, and now you can pop it on more than one target. So that's why it's your best source of heals, and it does quite a bit of damage. Devouring Plague is #3. Now, #4 depends on the situation. If you have Devouring Plague up on a target, you might want to go into your burst macro, which I'm going to cover very soon. If not, if you're able to free cast, you want to cast Mind Spike. Mind Spike, Mind Spike, Mind Spike. You could even cast Power Infusion to pop Mind Spikes at like a 1-second cast. It's pretty darn cool, and it can burst down a target rather quickly. Also, if you find yourself where you need to slow the target, or you're going to use your burst macro, that's when you're going to use Mind Flay, or aka Insanity. So that is your priority system. And here's your burst macro. It's not necessarily a macro, it's more or less a sequence. First and foremost, you want to hit Infusion to get the haste buff. Then you want to hit your PvP on-use Trinket to get the damage boost. If you can line it up where you get the proc for the damage boost, even better. Next up, Shadow Word Pain. And if you feel you have the time, Vampiric Touch. Don't worry if you don't get that one up. Now, you should have 3 Shadow Orbs before you even begin this process at the very least, at which point you're able to use Devouring Plague. Now, you just use Insanity. Between the 2 or 3 dots, the Insanity buff and the haste buff and the Trinket buff, that target is going down quick. And I mean quick. If they don't have any defenses up, if they don't have any hots on them, they're dead very quickly, because you're going to get to Shadow Word Death very quick, and you can hit it twice, and the target's gone. Now, here's a little bit more of a trick. If you can set yourself up to begin this process with 5 Shadow Orbs, You'll repeat the same sequence and hit Devouring Plague. Now you have 2 Shadow Orbs. In a matter of 2 seconds, because the global cooldown is going to take effect, you're going to be able to pop another Mind Blast. So 1 second global cooldown, 1 second Mind Blast, global cooldown, 2 seconds. Now you're back up to 3 Shadow Orbs and you hit Psychic Horror. This will give you an extra couple of seconds of insanity. It's insane. You're talking about a 6 or 7 second insanity. That is a little bit of a damage boost, let me tell you. So that is your burst macro, or burst sequence, I should say. Rumor has it, if you watch Luxeley's Ultimate Shadow Priest Guide on Daylight Savings Day, turn back the clock an hour, the extra 40 minutes, you actually gain 20 minutes. It's the new math. Somehow that's the way it works. Either way, thank you for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Whatever it is by you, morning, afternoon, or night, make the best of it. Luxeley out.